I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the 85th episode of It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club.
We're closing in on 100.
Yes, we are.
Woohoo!
Today we have an interview with Rea Frey. She is the author of the book Because You're Mine.
Rea always wanted to be a novelist. When she was little, her nose was either stuffed in a book, sniffing paper, absorbing words, or letting her imagination wander. If not reading, she was writing in journals, in notebooks, in diaries, on walls, in the sand, on legal pads, on typewriters, with quills. She hopes you will put down the phone and pick up a book, preferably hers when it hits the shelves, and find the joy in reading, because there's nothing quite like the power of words.
Because You're Mine is an eerie, suspenseful tale. Single mother Lee has a daily routine down to a science. Shower in 6 minutes, cut food into perfect squares, never leave her on the spectrum son Mason in someone else's care. She'll do anything to keep his carefully constructed world from falling apart. She'll do anything to keep him safe. But when her best friend Grace convinces her that she needs a break from motherhood to recharge her batteries, Lee gives in to a weekend trip. Surely a long weekend away from home wouldn't hurt. 48 hours later, someone is dead. But not all is as it seems. We would like to welcome Rea Frey. She is the author of Because You're Mine. Welcome, Rea.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would consider Because You're Mine to be the epitome of revenge by book. Was this the original track of the book, and is your personal history the reason?
The original track of the book was actually very different than what it ended up being. It kind of started out more as a women's fiction novel, actually, where we really focused on the friendships of 4 women. And then as it progressed, it's funny, the villain kind of changed a couple of times, and then it did kind of become this epitome of revenge by book, but it took several iterations to actually get it there.
Now, in Because You're Mine, you deep dive into a lot of different issues. Sociopathy, motherhood, secret past, sexual assault, and addiction. What would you consider the overriding message of the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of hard to sum up, but I really wanted to kind of show just humanity and all of its flaws, plus kind of what we tend to just show the world, especially in our friendships, how we can just present this like everything's fine picture to the outside world when often what lurks beneath the surface can be a lot darker. Our past and secrets can haunt us and kind of cause all of this chaos and commotion as it does in this book.
Well, that's for sure. No one is one thing or the other.
They're not. But I feel like that's how we are as humans, right? Like we're not any one thing. We're kind of made up of a bunch of different things.
Well, this book did a great job of that. You truly did not know what each one of these characters' true personalities were.
Right.
Interspersing the journal entries throughout the narrative is an interesting facet of the book. How did you intend for these entries to connect to the plot of the book? Because for me, reading it throughout, I thought that the journal entries belonged to the main character, Lee.
Right.
But by the end of the book, I wasn't sure if they actually belonged to Grace.
Right, exactly. I mean, that was kind of the point, is a journal is mentioned really early on in the book that Lee writes in this journal. So we have what you think are journal entries from this main character, but it kind of ends up being a reveal for what's really going on in the mind of another character. So that was kind of a diversion for readers layers. But yeah, it's not just a straight up journal entry as it's proposed in the very beginning. It's actually something else.
So it was very intentional.
Once again, we have a book that we can't talk too much about
I know.
we don't want to give anything away because we want our listeners to go check this book out because it was amazing. You do pour out your heart in the beginning of the book with a note about your own personal experience with sexual assault. But yet in the book, you kind of turn that on its head. Can you explain your inspiration for that?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of information out there, especially in the Me Too movement, just about women and their stories. And I'd never talked about this publicly before. And I was actually very hesitant to even put anything in the book since that's not really what the book is about. As I kind of talked to my editor about it, we needed some sort of trigger warning because of the types of issues that were in this book. But I wanted to kind of show a different side of sexual assault and how there are two sides to every story. And sometimes what we hear or what we're told, people can cling on to that as absolute truth. Like, this is what happened, and kind of live their whole lives building up this revenge, as one of the characters does in the book, when what the truth is something else. There's something that we're kind of leading up to in this book. We call it sexual assault, but there really are two sides to the story. And I kind of wanted to examine a different take on it and how sometimes actually it can be a misunderstanding based on what actually happens, especially in this book, what actually happens.
Well, there's always three sides to every story.
Yes, that is true.
Speaking of that, you did an excellent job of writing the mean girl vibe in this book. How much fun was it to write that?
It was pretty fun. I've always been interested in sociopathy and studying psychopaths and just relationships, especially relationships with women. I've done a lot of work with prisoners on death row and women who are accused of killing their own children, and just some really deep, dark, nasty truths that can exist for humanity. And I've seen a lot of stories that we don't often get to see in real life. So I kind of pulled from that and just my journalism background too, and just looking at these really flawed characters, which can kind of give off the mean girl vibe, but also wanted to focus on friendships between women who are supposedly really good friends. But as you go through the book, you realize no one really knows who anyone is. And I think in the day that we live in modern times with social media and just how we're presenting these pretty pictures to the world, that's often not the truth. And I feel like we hide behind a lot of what we present to the world. So I thought it was really fun to kind of examine these slightly unappealing characters. They are very, very flawed, but it was fun to write characters that weren't all shiny, happy, perfect people.
You did a perfect job on it.
Oh, thank you.
What comes first for you, the breadcrumbs or the amazing conclusion?
This book was a little bit different just because it did change in its intent and kind of the big reveal and the twist and all of that. So the breadcrumbs were actually laid first. And then I kind of had this aha moment about one of the characters. And I had to go back and make sure that once the reader knew this conclusion and knew the twist at the end, that if they went back and read the book again, it would almost read like another book and they could see all of the things that they had missed. So it was kind of intentional with laying the breadcrumbs, but then I had to really go back and make sure that everything did fit accordingly.
Definitely one of those books that you could go back and read again just to see if you missed something.
Yes,
absolutely. Definitely. Which was kind of fun. It was a little challenging to write because as a writer, and then again, working with my agent and editor, we're not looking at it objectively because we know. So that's kind of hard to really put yourself in the head of a reader and see if they're going to be surprised, number one, and number two, if it'll make sense. To this point, I have not had a single reader guess what the ultimate twist is at the end, which has been kind of shocking that no one's guessed, but also has made me really happy that no one's guessed it.
And I usually can figure books out, and I was shocked.
Good.
Anne read it first, and then I read it, and I said to her, "Did you guess the ending?"
And I said, no.
Well, good.
The protagonist in the book, Lee, she has a son named Mason, and we really enjoyed your portrayal of him. And to me, it seems like you have some knowledge of children on the spectrum. Am I correct?
Yes, I have a 7-year-old daughter. She's not on the spectrum at all, but she has friends who we've kind of grown up with that have been on the spectrum, some who do have full-blown autism, some who do have this sensory processing disorder, which is what Mason has. And I kind of wanted to just celebrate his uniqueness and celebrate these traits and not treat it gingerly, which I kind of feel like we do sometimes in literature and books. And I wanted him to just be this honest, funny, bright character that readers really rooted for. He's one of my favorite characters and was really fun to write.
Now, was the story written in a linear pattern, or did you write the different perspectives separately?
I actually wrote them separately because the original book started with Lee, Grace, Alice, and Carol. Each of them had their own points of view. And then the book ended up being just Lee, Grace, and Noah. I kind of wrote all of Lee's chapters first and really followed her story through. And then the same thing with Noah and the same thing with Grace. And because it goes past and present, it was a little bit more strategic about writing this kind of front story first in this present moment, and then going and writing the past and making sure that that flowed in a linear fashion as well.
Yeah, that was kind of very complex.
It was, yeah.
Seems like a hard way of getting your story out.
Yes, I don't think I'll be writing another book quite formatted like this. I mean, it was still really, really fun. It was just a little bit more strategic and having to be very careful about laying the foundation for the book.
But I enjoyed the uniqueness of it.
Thank you.
Hearing their own words really made a difference in the book.
Good, I'm glad.
You spoke about Alice and Carol, that you really wanted to include them in more major role in this book. Would you include them in any future books?
Yeah, I don't think I'll write anything with them. So I have 2 more books coming out with St. Martin's Press, and they're all standalone books. Don't think I'll be throwing them in, though. I will say Carol was one of my favorite characters in the early drafts. It was her and her mother, and they had a very interesting kind of humorous relationship. But yeah, no, I think they will kind of live and die with this book.
Okay, well then can you tell us about the new books that you do have?
Yes.
When are they expected to come out? Do you have any events you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. So I'm currently on book tour for Because You're Mine. The next 2 big things are BoucherCon and Southern Festival of Books in Nashville, which is where I live. My 3rd book is called Until I Find You, and it's out August 11th, 2020. And it is about a blind mother, Rebecca Gray, who believes her 3-month-old baby has been swapped and no one will believe her. It has been so much fun to write and really kind of celebrate a protagonist with a vision impairment. That's something I don't think we see a lot on the page with our heroes. It's very, very challenging, but also really fun.
Well, it sounds like you reach out for some really unique, interesting ideas.
Got to keep it interesting, right? It's a saturated space, so got to stand out somehow.
Send us copies of that.
Oh, I definitely will.
We will definitely either have you back on or at least give it a shout out on the show.
That would be amazing.
Rea, I just want you to share with our listeners how they can keep up with all the information you have to put out there.
Definitely. They can just go to my website, reafrey.com, reafrey.com. That has my events, ways to work with me. I also run a coaching business for writers for both fiction and nonfiction. All my social media links are on there, though I'm most often on Instagram.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Rea. We really enjoyed talking about your fabulous book.
Thank you so much.
We wish you all the best with your new books and any endeavors you decide to take. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye. That was a good book.
I would definitely say this was a different type of mystery for me, and that's what I enjoyed the most about it. It was not your typical mystery. It had a lot of different elements and a lot of different type of characters.
A lot of twists and turns in this one.
Another one we can't go too deep
much
in.
about.
Can't go into detail.
You think you know people, you find out you don't know anybody.
Well, her character portrayals were very, very good.
It really showed the dark side of people.
Yeah, because even the people who seem like sweetness and light, I think everybody has a little bit of a dark side.
But these people went over and above dark side.
Well, wait a minute. And then you got to throw in the element that some people that you thought were bad weren't as bad as what you thought they were.
Nobody is as they appear in the beginning of the book. By the time you get to the end, everything's changed. They page turn.
And I think there's something in here that just about everybody could relate to.
Yes.
You've got the single mother angle. You've got a kid on the spectrum. You've got alcoholism. There's a lot of different real life trauma going on.
There's a lot of trauma, but somehow Rea found a way to write it in a very fun way. It was one of these books that it was like hearing juicy gossip about people, and you just couldn't wait to find out where it was going to lead.
I can usually figure out a mystery.